And I rise today to also contribute to the Building Amendment, Registration and Other Matters Bill 2021. And this bill seeks to achieve two things, and that's to strengthen the registration and licensing scheme for tradespeople and give certainty around responsibility and funding around essential safety measures. Through the new Shadow Minister for Planning, and I congratulate him on his promotion, the member for Warrandyte, I'm pleased that the opposition are not opposing this bill. Building and construction is a major industry in Victoria. And I want to acknowledge the member for Broadmeadows' contribution about dealing with more than one thing, and that is the major issue of the pandemic, which was questioned by the opposition, and also getting on with other government business. And that's what we're exactly doing today, and that is getting on with government business and also dealing with the pandemic. It doesn't take much for the average person to drive a short distance from their home and see the investment that the Andrews Labor government is making and implementing across Victoria's big build. The major public infrastructure investment is something that will provide long-term economic growth for Victoria. And with this investment in infrastructure, we see growth in the private sector in both commercial and residential projects as confidence grows. This is self-evident, in particular with the outer suburbs like Melton, which has seen a huge growth. It also in regional areas, and as part of my electorate, Bacchus Marsh is also seeing massive growth, in particular with residential construction. And that's because more and more people are moving out of metropolitan Melbourne and moving to the regional areas, and I know that we've seen that evidence in my electorate and parts of my electorate, and that's the Bacchus Marsh area. Now, regions have been assisted by the Andrews Labor government's record investment into developing our regions, and the huge investment in Victoria's big build has led to huge investments and employment. And it was just recently announced about a number of regional areas that will be building a number of public and social housing. And I know Bacchus Marsh, I think the number there was about 30 to 40 new public houses across that Bacchus Marsh area. The high-skilled and high-valued employment has contributed to Victoria's economic activity. It has also developed skills that can be retained. And developing employment and skills investment in our young people and workers transitioning from other industries is important. And the requirement for apprenticeship ratios in many of our state government projects has been a significant feature of the Andrews Labor government's plan for Victoria, and I'm pleased to see that we are supporting apprenticeships and growing apprenticeships. This is fantastic for the future of development of Victoria, as development of these skills are retained in our state, and it's something that was lost some time ago under previous governments, and that was the loss of skills in trades areas, and in particular the loss of some apprentices. And what contributed to that was the privatisation of some of our TAFE, or the training sector, and that caused a massive downgrading of the numbers of apprenticeships and obviously the skills coming through there. TAFE has rightly been restored by the Andrews Labor government, and the investment is paying huge dividends. Not only can people have access to free TAFE courses, the quality of training is far superior than the failed attempt at privatisation through shoddy private registered training organisations during the Baillieu-Napthine years. This was evident during the Baillieu-Napthine years where, as the coalition government came to power with no plan for Victoria, investment into the state slumped.
Point of order, member for Warrandyte.
Deputy Speaker, respectfully, again, I interrupt the member for Melton. The legislation before us does not cover TAFE, the big build, or indeed government infrastructure. I do ask you to bring the member back to the narrow parameters of the bill, which is about the registration and licensing of tradesmen and tradeswomen. As I said, the issues of TAFE are not canvassed in this bill. The issues of the government's big build are not canvassed in this bill. The government's policies around apprentices are also not canvassed in this bill.
The member for Melton has strayed somewhat from the bill before us, and I do ask him to come back. I also ask members of the opposition, member for Warrandyte, to be succinct in your points of order, please. If you are referring to relevance, please point out that it is relevance that you're referring to. Member for Melton.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Creating small business or becoming a subcontractor can be a daunting task for many. Being a good tradesperson and being a good business person are two different prospects. The pressures to make sure you are adequately insured or abide by work cover requirements, fill out BAS statements and accounting practices, quoting and invoicing and planning could all be new pressures for worker needing to transition to a subcontractor or self-employed person. And what we sometimes see is that when tradespeople are forced to reinvent their economic certainties for themselves in this move into the subcontracting space. The changes outlined in this bill will improve the transitional scheme, making it more transparent and flexible for unregulated trades. This bill also introduces other administrative improvements, including expanding the regulation making powers in the Act to support the implementation of the scheme. And it does this by building regulation should ensure practitioners are capable, qualified and competent. To work towards this, we are introducing a specific framework for the registration of trade subcontractors. And we did these changes based on concerns raised by key stakeholders that require trades who predominantly operate as subcontractors. This government has welcomed and accepted this industry feedback and is making changes to improve the new scheme ahead of its introduction. The changes will make the scheme more efficient and fair for industry while delivering the government's policy objectives by reducing the incidence of non-compliant work, improving skills in the building industry, including the completion of apprenticeships, and ensuring tradespeople are accountable for the work. This bill does this by limiting subcontractors to working with registered building and only directly to consumers for very limited low-risk work. And the new trade subcontractor registration and employee licensing scheme will avoid over-regulation. Acting Speaker, this bill will introduce a number of measures to improve the flexibility of the scheme, and they are: flexibility will be granted to the Victorian Building Authority to extend a provisional registration or licence beyond 5 years, if further time is needed to assess or follow on application for a full registration or licence. It will also, where an applicant applies for a full registration or licence in the application period and does not meet entry requirements, the bill enables the VBA to grant a provisional registration. The bill extends an apprentice's ability to work unregistered or unlicensed until their application for a full registration or licence is finally determined by the VBA. And this makes allowances for any gap between the end of training contract and the determination of an application for registration. And it also allows allowances are made for those who have missed the provisional scheme to gain experience in regulated work for the purpose of obtaining a full registration or licence. The new scheme will be implemented in stages, and those stages are stage one, which will implement the scheme for the carpentry work first. Other trades like bricklaying and plastering will be considered in later implementation stages. And a regulatory impact statement for carpentry work will be released for public consultation later this year. And the RIS will set out in detail options for how the new scheme might work for this trade and provide a preferred option in draft regulation for further consultation. It is expected on the scheme's commencement a large number of unregulated tradespeople will need to be transitioned into regulation, and the government recognises that a significant portion of these tradespeople may not have formal qualifications. It is not the intention of the government to exclude this cohort from the scheme, but rather to encourage their entry into the scheme. This bill also seeks to extend the limitation period for cladding building actions. And there is no greater failure of self-regulation than that of the cladding crisis, an international problem that this government has taken world first leading on solving. Acting Speaker, this government is committed to making those responsible for non-compliant building work liable for their decision making. And the bill extends the limitation period for cladding building actions from 10 to 12 years or up to 15 years when the limitation period would either end on or after the 16th of July 2019 and before 1 December 2023. Furthermore, this bill also seeks to provide some essential safety measures in relation to retail leases. And the workaround changes to essential safety measures are a continuation of the work undertaken by this government last year around retail leases. Acting Speaker, this bill has sought to provide a new streamlined pathway to registration for subcontractors to strengthen and improve the registration and licensing scheme for tradespeople, include a framework to transition a large number of unregulated trades into regulation, provides some requirements for the maintenance of essential safety measures. I thank the Minister and I commend the bill to the House.